we just installed an Ubuntu, which is the Linux operating system, just in the earlier video. And I also told that is basically a Linux based operating system. So what I mean by that, so isn't Ubuntu a Linux operating system? See, there is thing called a kernel, and what kernel is, basically you can think of it like a seed in, a hard shell. So there is a seed which a plant seed, you can think in this, you can think in this way, that there is a plant seed which consists of, everything about that, how this tree is gonna be in size, what sort of fruit it is gonna bring, what sort of leaves, its lifespan. It's like a, a code which is being already been sequenced in this seed. And this Linux kernel is basically responsible for everything what your operating system is going to do. So based on this seed, people, what they do is they kind of do a little bit of modifications according to their need, and they create their own operating system based on this seed, this kernel. And this is what exactly mean by a Linux based operating system. Okay, so let's try to see it from here. So a Linux distribution is basically means, as I told, that there is this sequencing of code in this kernel, and we, what we do is we kind of, modify it according to our need. For example, if someone is more focused on, scientific research and want, more scientific, uh, tools on that system that can run efficiently, so they can modify the code of the kernel in that perspective. You can also think that, for example, there are multiple cars and every car has an engine, but that engine itself has, different sort of efficiency, different sort of horsepower according to the need of the user or the customer. So whatever the need is there, for example, a pickup truck has a like really different efficiency, but has a really high, being efficient in when it's time to pull, heavy loads, but it's gonna drink, it's gonna consume a lot of fuel. So you can think of that kernel into that way. Now, different cars, different trucks, different trees are known as, you can think of that as different flavor of the very same thing. So a plant is there, a tree is there, but trees are of different type. A tree might not, bring a fruit, a tree might bring a lot of fruit. So that's what distribution is. So same in this case of Linux, what we like, what programmers, what all of us has done is that we created, different versions of the very same Linux code, which is the kernel, and we have modified it in a way so that it can fulfill our need. You can like go on your search engine, you can try to, search like Linux distributions, and as you can see, like there are like more than 42 Linux distributions are there. Like if I just open it, like they are like, oh god, let's just look at how many are there. The Parrot OS is there, I've used it. I remember Ubuntu is there. I didn't use Bodhi, but I used like Fedora Linux also. I even have worked on Arch Linux. So, and yeah, even Kubuntu, I also have like used that too. So there's so many, versions of this Linux based operating systems. So we, so what this kernel does, so you can think that kernel is somewhat like a program. It's like this program right here. Okay, so kernel is like a seed. So kernel is here, it's a seed. Okay, it's, consists of, the code, very specific code. You can, modify that code, you can modify the code, and on top of this kernel there is this operating system thing, operating system, which, is like an application that interacts with user, that means us. So that also is your, Android. Even I think you can think of the iOS operating system on your Android, on your Apple devices. So Mac OS is also built on these kernels. And this operating system is actually an application under which you can run multiple applications also. Okay, it could be a server application, it could be a image editor or a image viewer, you know EDITOR, image editor is, could be there. And what this kernel does, it, it sits in between in this operating system and the hardware, the physical hardware that your device has. Maybe it could be like, display. For example, you say like, I want to, I click this image, so logically it should show you the image on the display. So OS send a signal to kernel, and kernel be like, okay, so the request is like to show an image. It also validates, see, kernel also validates that validates that whether this request is, genuine or not. Maybe it's a fake program is doing it, maybe a virus or an infection is doing in the program, maybe, an unwanted program is running, so it is, sending some request. So kernel also verifies that whether this is, a verified signal or not. As soon as it's verified, it also does this. As soon as the verification is done, kernel sends this signal to, the hardware, the display in your device. So for example, this is your computer machine right here, and here is the display. So the kernel, sends this request to display, hey, I want to fetch you for a moment, I want to borrow you for a moment and to show this image on the top of the screen. And the image just showed up. So this is what kernel does. This exactly what a kernel does. This is what an, Ubuntu and all these operating systems which are built on top of this kernel are there. And what they do is they, went on, ask the kernel, hey kernel, can you give me this? Hey kernel, can, is it possible? Kernel will like, hey, let me see like whether this is possible or not. Then there are certain thing called privileges which we're gonna see in the file system, like what these privileges are, how kernel verifies that whether a particular user is privileged or not to use a particular, request or service into the system. And this is what distributions are in, in Linux environment, in Linux, systems, that how many versions are there. You can use it for your own, you can even create your own version for your specific need. For example, if there is a need in, astrophysics lab for, calculating some of the mass of the planets or the new stars, or looking into that how the impact is going to be if they, started going on a on with the gravity pull on another planet. So those sort of calculation could be done, those sort of tools could be built in order to, achieve those, efficiencies. You can modify your kernel according to that. So this is what distributions are, and this is what these codes are. We'll see more of it here, and we'll try to get pretty good idea around, how Linux file systems are, like why they are created, what are the problems which a file system is, solving. So we'll see all those things in the next video. And that's for this video. That's what distributions are. We'll see now the file systems in the hierarchy, why the hierarchy is created, and what sort of problem the hierarchy has solved. So that's for this video. Okay.